Afternoon, friends, and welcome to another live stream with Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace. I have my good friend, retired Lieutenant Commander Joe Cardinale, filling in for Ed. Ed's getting a tattoo, so he's out there getting some ink. So he's not available right now. Shocking ruling by the Supreme Court today. I know you guys out there in true crime land are as pissed off and furious as I am. The shocking ruling was Adam Montgomery's murder conviction was overturned on a procedural error by the court. It's just mind blowing that this is happening. But actually, when the trial was going on, we saw some of these signs. Hey, Joe, Adam Montgomery, a baby killer, he killed his own flesh and blood, his daughter. The evidence was overwhelming. The nasty, mean things that he did with his daughter's body once he bludgeoned her to death was just beyond anything that you could imagine. This case shocked the world, shocked the nation. He took his own flesh and blood and carted her from place to place, storing her remains at different locations. Your thoughts on something like this, and how do we get where we are today?
It's just a shame that we are here, but I think the police chief that I believe said let everybody digest what's happening right now, the fact that it can be done and can be retried and everything, and it's good that we do have the overwhelming evidence. It's a shame we have to go through this, because if it's just going to waste the court's time, the money, and everything else, and this guy is just going to be convicted again, unless they think they can get him off on this charge. I don't see that. All right. But the underlying charges, the separate charges, is still sticking, as you and I have discussed. And he's going to do some time for that. Hopefully a good portion of his life for that. The only difference is right now that life sentence is off the table.
Yeah, 100%. And Joe, look, the thing of it is that Adam Montgomery was not, he was a no-show in court. He refused to come to court on his murder charges and these other charges that he was found guilty of. That is assault in the second degree, murder in the second degree, falsifying physical evidence, and abuse of a corpse, that being his own daughter. He did not show up in court one day. For those of you in the chat, how many of you were outraged that Adam Montgomery was allowed to sit in his cell and just disrespect the court and not even show his face for not one day? It was a daily watch for Adam Montgomery at court, and he was a no-show. It was like a disappearing act, and like people were like, why doesn't the judge force him? And you said it to me before we went live. Why did they allow him to be not present in that courtroom? It's just beyond my imagination,
And the reason is what we all want to see is this animal in court, and see his reactions when certain questions are asked, and see his attitude and his body posture and everything else, the way we've watched so many other cases. But he knows he can't sit in that courtroom, because he does, he'd rather just sit in his cell saying, I'll just sit here. What's done is done. That, it is what it is right now.
Yeah.
But for his lawyer to get creative with this and challenge it, I mean, that's just a feather in his cap for picking on a certain
technicality.
Yeah, it's a technicality, but there had to be case law for this in the past too. So
it almost seemed like Adam Montgomery, his attorneys let him on to make these statements as well, because they're coaching him on what to say. And before this trial commenced, he stood up before the court and said to the judge, I did not kill my daughter, Harmony Montgomery. Words to that effect. He said, please, judge, do not allow the court or the jurors to hold these charges against me. I did not kill my daughter. He was sentenced to 32 and a half years on weapons charge. He was a felon out on parole. People are calling him a coward in the chat, by the way. Multiple people calling him a coward, and that he is a murdering coward. I hope he doesn't have one good day in prison. He's not going anywhere. But let's take a listen to this. This was early this morning, around 10 o'clock Eastern. This ruling came out really early, and it was really disheartening to hear it. So let's take a listen, and we're going to go over the nitty-gritty of what this ruling is about and what it means for us.
And 2 years after a jury found Adam Montgomery guilty on all charges, the state Supreme Court here in New Hampshire has overturned the most serious charge of second-degree murder. Now, Montgomery stood trial back in 2024 on several charges, and prosecutors argued he killed his 5-year-old daughter, Harmony Montgomery, in 2019. Evidence and testimony recounted how Montgomery repeatedly punched the girl in the head because she was having accidents in the vehicle that they were all living in. Montgomery was also found guilty for dismembering her body, keeping her remains in a garbage bag at various locations until he dumped her body in Massachusetts. Now, she has not been found. Now, the state Supreme Court here in New Hampshire says the second-degree murder charge should have been tried separately from an assault charge, and that evidence from the previous assault had a risk of influencing the jury on the murder charge. So now the state Supreme Court essentially affirming all of the other charges he was found guilty on, except for second-degree murder. They have now overturned that conviction. Live in Manchester, New Hampshire, Sarah Conji, WCVB News Center 5.
All right, Sarah, thank you. There are obviously many questions surrounding the latest court decision.
So joining us now is our legal analyst, Jim Barretto. Judge, thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
Good to see you, Katie. Good to see you, Ben, as well.
All right. So, Judge, first off, explain this decision, because to a lot of us, it doesn't really make sense. Why would the Supreme Court say he should have had separate trials for the murder charge versus the assault charge?
Yeah, particularly where this was one of the most extraordinarily heartbreaking and, frankly, enraging cases we've heard in a long time. But as Sarah touched upon moments ago, this defendant was charged both with second-degree assault and second-degree murder, as well as other charges after Harmony disappeared. Prior to trial, the defendant objected to combining the assault case, which was based on entirely separate pre-death evidence, with the murder case.
You see what this former judge just said, Joe? Prior to the trial, this defendant objected to having his murder trial and his assault charges combined into one trial. So his attorneys, I'll put us back on for a second, his attorneys were obviously, and this is what defense attorneys are supposed to do, they're supposed to represent their clients. They said, hey, we may have a chance on a appeal. And that's
and
what
his statement that you said, Judge, please don't do this. You can bet anything on that they coached him to say that, to set this scenario up for a different trial. What they expect to gain at a second trial, I don't know. All right, maybe they have something else up their sleeves. But the thing is, I just saw a comment about, shame on the state Supreme Court. Everybody has to understand they have to go by the law that's, and the cases that are out there. It's not something that they have to rule the way they see it. And it's not just one justice doing this. They all come together and they go, you know what, there's case law on this. We've seen this before. We just can't let it sit like this. It's not like we lost everything, so it's just back to the drawing board and retrying this. But on the second trial, I would demand that he's in the courtroom for this.
Yeah, I hope that they do make sure he gets dragged out. Of course, he's going to be tried by the AG's office, not by the state. So it's, not by the local, authorities, the district attorney's office. It's going to be handled by the state attorney general's office. So I think they will make sure that because of course he's not in a county jail now. He's upstate, he's in a state jail. Adam Montgomery is not going to be going anywhere. And Mel Stiller says it well. First, Alex Murdaugh, now Adam Montgomery, but you could throw in Letitia Stout in there. This new recent conviction just the other day of Carmelo Anthony, they're already filing an appeal. There's nothing to lose on the defense side to file these. And sometimes it's like a roll of the dice. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But the good thing is, boss, is that he's got 32 and a half years on one weapons charge, right? Prior. And then all of these extra charges, 3.5 to 7 on the assault, 3.5 to 7 on the abuse of a corpse, 12 months, which is suspended. So Adam Montgomery, I believe, is in his 30s. I sent you a text on it. I corrected myself. I think he's 34, 35 at this time. So he's relatively young, but that 32 years alone is going to bring him into his 60s. And I feel strongly that based on the evidence that we saw in trial number one, it's not going to change. It's going to be relatively the same. They may present it in a different way, but based on the evidence, he's not going anywhere. So.
You know, you just mentioned a few great cases that you can reference for, you know, with the appeals and everything, and Carmelo Anthony being the one that you and I have had a discussion about. And the one thing that stands out to me in a case like that, and I think prosecutors know this going into the cases, we don't want to leave it that they do prepare that even if they do appeal it, we still have such a strong case.
Right.
In the Carmelo Anthony case, and I hate to jump from one to the other, but just so you put, you know, what's going on in the minds of defense attorneys, all right, that defense attorney chose not to put him on the stand. And somebody made a very good point on that, saying if your client, if he's claiming self-defense, he needs to explain why it was self-defense, right, to a jury. That's what they hope to get out of an appeal with this. But the thing is, he agreed not to. They signed papers on that. No, I'm not going to testify. So that's going to come into play with that. In this case here, I think it's just a preponderance of evidence that's going to, you know, tip the scales right where they should be. Yeah. And, you know, and hopefully they can even get something a little stronger on this here. I mean, there is life. There is no death penalty up there. So it's going to be the same sentence for him. But, you know, I think we're just looking for notoriety with this, as are the attorneys.
I concur, boss. The Attorney General, this just came over the wire. Attorney General John Formella, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, but the Attorney General from state of New Hampshire is just confirmed that the Attorney General's office will in fact retry Adam Montgomery for the murder. Beautiful. So that's one piece of good news here today with this shocking revelation early this morning. We were all like, what in the actual F is going on here? But we're going to go to another piece that's going to really break it down in layman's terms about what happened here and why the state Supreme Court came with this ruling. And I believe this ruling, as you just alluded to, is fair and just, because it's an arguable point that a Supreme Court listened to the argument and said, yeah, we're in agreement. He should have been tried separately. So we're going to see Adam Montgomery 2.0 get convicted again. He's not going to see the light of day. I hope he rots in jail, in prison, and I hope he doesn't see one good day.
The prosecution argued that the assault evidence was relevant to show the defendant's extreme indifference to Harmony's life. The defense, on the other hand, argued that, look, combining the two cases in a single trial jeopardized his right to a fair trial because jurors would likely conclude that, hey, if he abused her before, he therefore probably killed her later.
So, Judge, okay, this reversal is due to a procedural flaw. And now what happens?
Well, that's an excellent question. It was not reversed on sufficiency of the evidence grounds. What that means, if it had been reversed on sufficiency grounds, double jeopardy would likely bar a retrial. However, as you pointed out, this was not reversed on sufficiency grounds.
How important is that for our true crime enthusiasts to understand that? This is a former judge here. He's a retired judge. He basically said if it was evidentiary, if there was something wrong with the evidence that was presented, you can't retry him under double jeopardy. But because it's not that, it's a procedural court, it's the court's fault, double jeopardy doesn't apply. So that's a great thing. So for those of you who are listening to other people talk about this, and if they don't highlight this part, they're doing this an injustice, and they're spreading misinformation. But this former judge said it so well here. The double jeopardy doesn't come into play. He's going to be tried, and I just got it over the wire. Attorney General from the state of New Hampshire confirms that they will retry the case. That's John Formella, the Attorney General for New Hampshire.
And in my view, although I have the decision, it's right here, it doesn't explicitly say it, I interpret this decision as remanding it to the trial court for additional proceedings, meaning he can be tried again, but only for the second-degree murder charge.
All right, so Harmony's body never found. Did this play any factor in this?
It actually, Ben, I think played a huge factor because the evidence of the second-degree assault was extremely strong, where the evidence on the murder, which was, as you point out, a no-body circumstantial only case, was extremely weak. So the odds that the jurors did fill in the gaps using the assault evidence to supply perhaps missing gaps in the murder evidence was high. And the New Hampshire Supreme Court agreed that the risk of prejudice was so high that.
And again, people are saying in the chat, this case haunted, I would say this case haunted 99.999% of the people who watched it. If you were the part of that one little, small percentage of people that it didn't haunt you, then you aren't human. But this is our victim here, Harmony Montgomery. Very sad, very, very violent case. And again, today kind of rocked the true crime world. Jody Galloway says, thank goodness he'll be retried. Yeah, amen to that.
Here's the thing though, Ron. You got to, read into this right now. This is where they're calculating, and they may find some room there too. They might have some wiggle room, and I'm going to tell you why. If they don't have a body. All right. They don't have a body. And that in itself can lead to a lot of questions that have to, if they put any doubt in the new jury's mind without that body, and he turns around, he says, with the assault, I mean, the assault stays. How does the assault stay? And they don't describe, we have to really listen to what the testimony was for the assault. Right. All right. But at what point do they say, we have a dead body here? Or we don't know where she is. She could still be alive or anything. They'll bring anything into the picture right now. And the reason why it was separated and why the judges felt that way, and the way you even said it, it's a correct decision. If they were basing their emotions on everything else they heard from those other charges, and the preponderance was there for them, and that's where, and it was all combined together, but they still didn't separate it at the end on each charge. Each charge was what it was. And they're probably using the strongest cases they had with the assault and with everything else. Right. And the corpse. That's the thing that's going to be telling, is the corpse charges. They didn't throw those out, so he's still convicted of that. That's where the prosecution is going to build their case.
Yeah.
All right. With the corpse charges. So
folks are asking, will his wife, Kayla Montgomery, which is not Harmony's mom, biological mother, have to testify again? I believe so. I believe that she will be called back by the Attorney General's office, by the AG. Second degree assault charges carried 4 to 8 years. Second degree murder, we know, is off the table. Let's take a listen to this, because this describes some of the charges in greater detail. So let's take a listen to this.
Gene, that's an important distinction to make here. This trial included several charges that carry their own sentences. Among them, second-degree assault, falsifying physical evidence, and abuse of a corpse. Just before his trial began in February of 2024, Montgomery acknowledged his guilt to falsifying physical evidence and abuse of a corpse. He was sentenced 3.5 to 7 years on the evidence charge. The abuse of a corpse sentence was 12 months suspended. Now, he was convicted of second-degree assault along with the murder conviction. That assault sentence is for 4 to 8 years. When it comes to the murder case, here is how the state could move forward.
Under Supreme Court rules, there is an opportunity for the state to file what's called a motion to reconsider, where they would have to point to specific points of law and argue that the Supreme Court got those things wrong. Frankly, those motions don't often have a high chance of success, but it is something that I'm sure the Attorney General's office will assess and evaluate. If they try to file a motion to reconsider and it fails, or if they just decide not to go that route, then the other option would be deciding whether or not they want to retry Adam Montgomery for the second-degree murder charge.
Now, the sentences from his murder trial will not begin until after he serves time in a weapons case. A year before the murder trial, Montgomery was convicted in a weapons trial. He was sentenced.
So here we go. 32.5 years in prison in a separate weapons case. Those of you following this closely, by a show of hands, please put a 1 in the chat if you recall this trial. Actually, I don't even think there was a trial. He just pled guilty to these weapons charges, and as he was sentenced in 2023, this is where he stood up before the court and said to the judge, "Please, Judge, give me a fair trial. I did not murder my daughter." It was outrageous to hear him say that. Let me know if you remember that by putting a 1 in the chat. If you don't, put a 2. But yeah, this is him right there. That powder blue shirt, and then he vanished. He never showed his face again in court. After this, he called out sick when he was getting ready to be bussed over. The judge in the case said, "Oh, well, we'll give him till tomorrow. Maybe we'll see if he shows up." I was outraged by that. She was so light on him. I'd have been like, drag this mother effer out of his cell and get him into court.
Yep.
Put him before me. I don't give a F.
Yep.
I don't give a rat's ass what this fucking piece of shit is claiming. Have him in court, and he better be here tomorrow. I'll find him in contempt, and he'll get more charges at the end. It is what it is. It didn't happen, and we all just grinned and bared it. But let's take a listen to this.
Weapons case. A year before the murder trial, Montgomery was convicted in a weapons trial. He was sentenced to at least 32.5 years in prison on charges including being an armed career criminal. During the sentencing hearing in this case, Montgomery insisted he did not kill his daughter Harmony. Montgomery is serving the sentences on those weapons convictions before, again, the sentences from that case in 2024. Jean?
All right, thanks, Tom. And Montgomery's defense attorney just released a statement to News 9, and we are quoting here, "The court's decision addresses important aspects of a fair trial. Justice is only served when we provide a person accused of a crime a fair and just trial. A trial that is not conducted with those principles in mind does not do justice to persons accused of a crime or people who are victims of crimes." You can keep track of the latest.
So there you have it. Joe, again, I appreciate you dropping everything and taking the time. When I reached out to Ed, I didn't know what he was doing. I thought he was still doing his training, but he is back home getting a little ink work today. But yeah, this case has haunted most of the true crime world because it involved this young, innocent child who didn't know what was happening to her, and he just reached around, by his wife's own admission, around the backseat of the car and bludgeoned this poor little girl to death, and then just proceeded to drive around with her dead body in the trunk of the car. It's just crazy. It's just the case is crazy. We're going to have to see it and hear it again. It was televised the last time, and I'm not quite sure if that's going to happen again. Your thoughts on the retrial, Joe? Will it be televised? Will the AG's office say, "Hey, we don't need a circus show here. Let's keep this on the wraps"? Your thoughts on that, boss?
No, I think they're gonna definitely want to televise this because they're gonna need all the public support that they can get, for this. They're gonna want everybody to be, out there and be outraged the way you're seeing it in the comments right here on your show. But think about this. There is a chance, and I think only the experts can go to this as far as lawyers and judges, like you just heard. If she testified and said that he bludgeoned her to death and that's it, he can say he had a lapse over there for a minute or whatever it was. They're going to try to get him off on a lesser charge. And if they accomplish that, then that's going to be something for them as well. But this still doesn't, for him to get up there and say, "I don't want to be, I didn't kill my daughter. I didn't kill my daughter." Then the wife's testimony is going to be the key in this. Yes,
Right.
she did.
Yeah.
What he did with the body, I don't know. But yes, he did. So that's going to be key in this. And if they get her to recant on anything and put any kind of doubt, that's going to be a problem. And she could be held too for that as well.
There's a lot of video of them carting what's alleged to be Harmony Montgomery's remains around in like in a stroller. She was transferred from a black plastic bag into a cooler. And I hate that I even have to rehash or go over this again, but I just want the audience to realize, and some people who might stumble across this man was an evil demon. This man was a monster, is a monster. And he's a menace to society. He should not be see the light of day for his rest of his natural born life. He should die and rot from the inside out inside his cell, as far as I'm concerned, for what he did to his own flesh and blood. And I'm sorry if I'm being a little shrewd here and a little bit, straightforward with you, but there's no way to sugarcoat this. This guy is a scumbag, and he deserves everything that he gets. And I hope that bugs are crawling on over him every night, and that he is having a miserable time in prison, because this guy is a demon, big time. I have to run out, Joe, but I want to thank everybody for joining us here. Harmony Montgomery, may she continue to rest in peace. We're going to get justice for her. The AG, like I said, came over the wire and confirmed that he will, in fact, retry Adam Montgomery for the murder of Harmony Montgomery. So, Joe, I want to thank you for taking out the time. This is one of the shorter live streams that I've done, but my wife is knocking on the door, and we got an appointment at 4, so I got to start getting on the road and driving out into Suffolk. So I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank all of the replay viewers, the moderators, the super chatters, the folks who become members of this stream and support us. This has been a breaking news story, shocking ruling today by the Supreme Court. Adam Montgomery's murder conviction has been overturned, but it's not over. It's not over until the fat lady sings, as they say, right, Joe? Mm-hmm. I think this guy's going to get what he's got coming to him, and just take a look at that guy. A real monster.
We don't have an aha moment during these trials, and I really worried about the wife. I think a lot of things have been laid out that if we get this is what you're going to have to do. But I think the judge should be strong with this. I think the attorney general is going to be smarter than the defense attorneys when it comes to that, because they know what to expect, where their chinks in the armor may be, and what they're going to have to reinforce. And I think her testimony is going to be key. And we should follow this.
Yes, amen to that, Joe. Make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the thumbs up button. It's free to do that. We appreciate all the support. We'll see you on the next one. On behalf of Joe Cardinale, Crime Time with DutyRon and Ed Wallace, we want to wish you guys a great Thursday, and we'll see you on the next one. Peace and love.